So you started IB, you have one piece done, and you're scared. What to do? The IB Diploma Program Visual Arts course encourages students to challenge their own creative and cultural expectations and boundaries. It is a thought-provoking course in which students develop analytical skills in problem-solving and divergent thinking while working towards technical proficiency and confidence as art makers. Hello and welcome back to this new video. Today we will talk about the IB DP Visual Arts course, as I have received so many questions under my last video about the process portfolio, and today I thought I would like to answer them. So stay tuned if you want to know more about the process portfolio and the comparative study. If you're just looking for some tips for your exhibition, you can watch my previous video on the exhibition. If you have any more questions, you can leave them down below and maybe we can do a part 2. So let's start. First of all, I wanted to thank you for all the positive feedback you left under that video. Many of you said it was helpful for them, and I'm glad that it could help you out. The whole IB Visual Arts course is quite complex. It's not only about having good drawing skills. Your written assignments are just as important, and it adds to your tight schedule. And through this video and the previous ones, I intend to shine some light on the situation. So let's start. Stryer wrote, "Hi Steffi, thank you so much for your advice. For my IB year 1, I got a 4 for my process portfolio. My process portfolio consisted of photocopies of my visual art journal on a PowerPoint. Would you recommend typing it out and digitalizing it? If so, should I scrap all of it and start from scratch? Do you have any advice?" So thank you, Strive, for your question. You may have seen other portfolios on YouTube, and having your own handwriting really adds another layer of creativity and a personal touch to it that makes it really unique. However, the IB examiners would prefer legibility, hence why typing it would be very beneficial. I've also seen students' works where they combined both of it. They did some handwritten annotations that are easily to read, especially for the formal analysis and for the higher level part where you connect it to your own artworks. However, next to it, they also had their typed text, because even for the process portfolio, the assessment criteria are based on your written work and about the content that you add to your page, hence why you shouldn't compromise on that. I've got a few questions where you're on a time crunch and are just generally overwhelmed with all of the different assignments, where you are already in year 2 and the deadlines are coming up. I think for most schools they should be just around the corner, having them set for February and March for the final exhibition. And I think a very common approach to IB Visual Arts is focusing on developing a theme and developing your skills in the art lessons themselves is most of the time the focus of at least the first year. So you're just contemplating and collecting. And when the deadlines and final submissions come up, you're then also wondering what to include and how to present it in an effective manner. Put every information in, how to lay out the pages especially, how to title them and where to focus on. Of course, information for that can be extracted directly from the assessment criteria. However, there's no strict guidelines, at least for the process portfolio. There are some formats that you could adapt, so if you're interested in that, I could maybe try and recreate a few of my slides from my process portfolio. I will link the video there and you can tell me if that would be helpful. For the comparative study, it's more straightforward. There are a few set pages that you should include. They'll just help with structure and format. And I've also recreated 2 of my slides to give you some inspiration and an idea how to make yours. The next question comes from Leah. This really helped, thank you. I have a couple of questions though. What exactly was your theme? Your artwork is beautiful, by the way. So did you get a 7 overall? Thank you, Leah, for your message. My theme was the transience of life, so how everything evolves and constantly changes. And so for my year of assessment, we were not allowed to include any final images in my process portfolio. So I did a separate video, just showing the final ones to just give you an overview how the process portfolio actually supported my exhibition and what I included in my exhibition. Because not every page on my process portfolio was aimed to be exhibited. However, it helped me with showing the process and learning some techniques and also getting to know some of the artists. So I will link the video. Next question comes from Luke. He said this was incredibly helpful, so thank you. Just one question, however. What program did you use to create this process portfolio? Rukina also asked if I did my process portfolio on Keynotes, like my screens. So for my process portfolio, I actually started using Pages. So I had a very unconventional way of working on my screens. So I first pasted all of my photos in one presentation and then exported it as a PDF and then added text to it. However, my computer crashed and everything, so all of the text that I added was lost and I had to redo everything. So what I then used to lay out my pages was PowerPoint. I think that's very helpful, and many schools offer the whole Office 365 package to download. If not, another option, if you're using a Mac for example, would be using Keynote. It's the equivalent to PowerPoint, only for the Mac optimized, and it's already on your Mac. But always remember to make a backup copy, so on an external drive, or maybe upload it to Google Drive. If your school uses Google Drive, you can also use Google Sheets. You have also some format options, and I think they even updated a few, so you can create the Venn diagrams and overlaying your painting to the background of it to make it more creative. If you need a tutorial on that, you can just let me know. Next question comes from me. She says, I wanted to ask that the process portfolio screens that you submitted are mostly from year 2 or both years evenly. I just started IB 2 months ago and I'm very confused and quite terrified as my teacher is not very helpful. So I think what many schools and teachers also face is that they lack the experience. They have not had any excelling students in their art class, and so it can be quite different on how they approach providing you with the resources and a structure while still giving you the freedom to explore artistic ideas, because that is a huge advantage of being in school, that you have access to all the materials. I know due to the changed circumstances in the past 2 years, it could have also been a little bit more difficult to access those materials if you didn't have them at home. But back to the question. So my teacher gave us a lot of freedom and allowed us to explore the ideas we wanted. In the beginning, she taught us a bit about certain art movements, but only briefly, and she asked us to do a presentation on them. As our school got a new quilt, she also encouraged us to experiment with it and do a project. However, I at least didn't include that in my final artwork, so this 3D sculpture others in my year did. Apart from one piece, which you can see in the background, I finished all of my artworks in the second year, and actually just before the exhibition and just in time, I had started and I had collected materials and I had experimented a bit. However, when it came to finalizing it, I really took my time, so they were only finished just before the exhibition. And even though the exhibition is worth over 40%, we only got to write the supporting text to the artworks weeks before the exhibition. There's also so much else to consider on how to hang the things, but as already mentioned, you can watch the tips that I have for you down below, because especially the exhibition is neglected a lot because you're so focused on having the academic written pieces finished. And I would really emphasize having a nice display for your artworks. So for creating your process portfolio, I collected everything throughout the 2 years, and I would just recommend for you to take many photos along the process when you are creating your artworks, and maybe write down some notes that you have to them, some thoughts that you had, some initial ideas, because you can later on include them and tell the story about your creation process. For my process portfolio, I typed all of my text because I have a very small handwriting, but I've also seen examples where students have a really unique handwriting and were able to add titles. For me, it was just easier to put everything in this one document and then be able to rearrange it later on, as opposed to printing all of the photos and sticking them into a physical art journal. There were also some questions about the technicalities of, for example, my design and the layout I choose to do. So I just tried to find my way around PowerPoint and use the tools that they offer. There was also a question how to do that irregular form, so if you're interested, I could also try to pick out a few slides. Most of my design was kind of a compromise between aesthetic and functionality, hence why I tried to keep my layout simple. Franzi says, I'm thinking about taking visual arts and I love photography and design and editing, but I'm not good at drawing at all. Do you have to paint? So thank you. That is actually a very good question and something that opposes students to start this course. My teacher really tried to bring the aims of the IB Visual Arts course closer to us. She wanted us to understand the changing dynamic of the art and really explore and value the diversity of the art across the times and places and culture. So for the IB Visual Arts course, you have the option. The options for the visual art making practice are endless. So for standard level students, the submitted work must be in at least 2 of the art making forms from separate columns that you can find in the assessment criteria. For the higher level students, you're required to have at least 3 different art making forms. So you have an option between 2-dimensional forms, 3-dimensional forms, in lens-based, electronic and screen-based forms. So you have the option to decide between drawing, painting with, for example, acrylics or watercolor. For 3D, you can go with clay and ceramics, or try making sculptures, and even choose textiles for your 3D art making form. For example, with weaving, or maybe even try embroidery. My IB projects really encouraged me to start and look into embroidery, and I really enjoyed doing it, and I included it in some of my final artworks. Hand embroidery can be quite time consuming, but you can be very creative and add just another layer to your existing pieces. So from the third column, you could go into digital art, so maybe using some programs for the iPad. If you have an iPad, for example, you can do photography or videos, and you could exhibit that by using a projector, for example. You could also do illustration and maybe go into typography, so it's not essential that you paint. However, it can also be quite beneficial for your cross-portfolio if you challenge yourself and try an art making form that you're not comfortable in. Maybe you have an artist that you feel inspired by and want to take a deeper and closer look at his way of making art, for example, and you can try that out and include that in your part of the experimentation for your cross-portfolio. Sakti asked, thanks, I'm presently making mine and I am not able to fit in many texts and pictures on one slide due to lack of space. My teacher told me that the IB font size limit is 12, so I'm not able to fit it into a lot of text. Did you increase the size of your PowerPoint? And to that question I can say yes, I changed my format. I had on some of my slides I even went a little bit smaller than the recommended size. So just depending on your personal document, you should just consider legibility, the layout and the structure to make it more comprehensible for the teacher and also the examiner to follow your thought process. Next question comes from Suri. Hi, I have a question. I'm doing IB Visual Arts higher level. For criterion B, critical investigation, can I analyze artists that I've analyzed in my comparative study? For your cross-portfolio, I think it should go beyond what you included in your comparative study. I know it is very helpful if you have the comparative study already and already got an in-depth insight into the art movements, and the higher level part asks you to connect that to your own art making. However, for the cross-portfolio, it is intended that you do a little bit more analysis into, for example, their general techniques. So how you could maybe include your artist would be to analyze a few of his works, pick out common themes, pick out maybe what colors they are using, what special oil paint they're using, what kind of brush strokes they make in their paintings. And you could try to mimic that technique and use your own subjects. But then to develop it further, maybe combine it with a different art making form, with a completely different kind of subject. For example, if the artist does the impressionism landscapes, then you could maybe take your own first-hand photos of your surroundings and use his way of painting, like with the brush strokes and the colors he uses. But the focus in your portfolio should also really be your experimentation and your demonstration of being able to use a variety of different art making forms. And you should always make it personal. That's why for the portfolio it is also helpful to only pick a few aspects of the artists that you incorporate into your work. It doesn't have to be so extensive as for a comparative study. Next question comes from Martina. How did you include the drawings? Did you scan them? So through my experimentation process, I collected sketches on random pieces of paper, as I didn't have one art journal. Some on canvases, some on fabric. And most of them didn't fit into my scanner, so I just used my phone and an app called Scan, but there are also some even from Adobe that are free in the App Store, and I just ensured I had good lighting. And in that app I took a photo and it converted it into a scan. I saved it as a PDF, sent it over to my computer and included that for my portfolio. Next question is how many 3D pieces I added. So for my final exhibition I had one 3D piece, however I had 4 mixed media artworks that were in my final exhibition. So that was it for this video. I hope I could help you out. I go more into depth in my previous IB videos. That would be top 5 exhibition mistakes. That would be about the exhibition, so the mistakes that you should avoid. And I also share 5 tips with you to exceed in your exhibition. If you want to see how I use the free program Google Slides to recreate a few pages of my comparative study, you can find the video on the layout there. Leave your questions down below for part 2. If you need individual support, you can also reach out via this email and we can talk about how I can maybe support you. I'm always very grateful to, through that, get to know your inspirations, your aspirations, and your own unique ambitions for your art. And in the end, I just wanted to say that the course encourages you to challenge your own creative and cultural expectations and boundaries. It should be thought-provoking and enable you to develop analytical skills in problem-solving and divergent thinking, whilst developing your own skills and technical proficiency and ultimately your confidence in art making. Inspiration for your art and your theme can come from anywhere. It can come from the graffiti on the wall next to your bus station. You maybe found something on social media that sparked your interest and you felt inspired by. And I think the course should encourage you to try out new things and connect your personal story with it and find your own unique voice. Thank you for watching and I see you next time.